Thank you. Concur, I have to say this motion is both timely, appropriate, indeed comprehensive in its nature and extent, and I compliment my colleague Janice Sullivan for bringing this forward. Of course, she's worked hard to develop a very comprehensive policy, affordable housing for all. I'm very lucky and indeed proud to be the eldest of a family of 10 who was reared in a local authority house, as indeed is many of my extended family. So I'm able to speak to this with a detailed knowledge of that fact, maybe that not everybody can. And I remember getting the house we got in 1960, there was no water, outdoor toilets. There was no water. And that's why I never had any problem about paying for water. We brought it down by hand in 1972 and we handed it over to local authority to charge us. And I went away as a young lad and earned money to build on additional rooms and to build a toilet and to bring the outdoor toilet in. So I have a very deep affinity to local authority housing because I know what it means, as does my extended family. And I'm proud to say that at the Labour Party we've always been very committed to the public provision of housing. And we bring forward this motion based on a comprehensive housing analysis which would see 80,000 homes built over 5 years. Our housing policies, Minister, are practical, they're implementable, they're fully costed, and they place the state at the centre of activity in housing, and that's where it should be. The state has to be the fulcrum and focus of a comprehensive housing building programme. The role of state agencies leading the delivery of housing, as they've done through Ireland's history, seems lost in the current government, seems lost altogether. It gets lost in the debate. That was a central function of local authorities, and it should remain so. Every local authority should have a land bank, and that means that many villages there to be houses built across their area in their jurisdiction, which will allow houses to be built and make a substantial contribution to reducing the number of applicants. And of course it would sustain rural Ireland and those villages that are in decline, and those shops and churches and sporting clubs that are under pressure. Our motion aims to make the government face up to the realities faced by hundreds of thousands of people in Ireland right now. Rents are way beyond the ability of many workers to pay. Council housing lists are out through the roof, and tens of thousands of people are unable to heat their homes adequately. And I want to particularly focus on this. Tackling food poverty is a priority for the Labour Party, and that's why we have included this right in the heart of this motion. Residential use of energy, oil, gas and solid fuels accounts for about 9.5% of all our carbon emissions. That's around 5.7 million tonnes of greenhouse gases annually. That has to be halved by 2030, which means a massive drive for home energy efficiency. If we do this right, we can eliminate fuel poverty at the same time as lowering carbon emissions. So we get two bangs for one buck. From recent surveys, we know that around 75,000 households, or 4.4%, are unable to afford to keep their homes adequately warm. And around 138,000 households, or 8.1%, go without heating at some point during the year. We know that elderly people or people with disabilities require more home heating because they spend more time at home. Yet they often are those people on the lowest incomes and are on fixed incomes, so they have very significant difficulties. The government did not introduce regulation in relation to energy efficiency until 1979. And remember, more than half the housing stock was built before that date. So significant thermal retrofits were not introduced in 2006, meaning that most Irish homes are not properly insulated. And that raises the cost of heating, and it also means more carbon emissions to achieve the same level of heating. So there's plenty of action that can be taken by the government to address this issue. If we don't already have this information, we should require every local council to report on the energy ratings of all its housing stock. Everyone in public housing should have a fair expectation of a home that they can heat to a decent standard of comfort. They're entitled to the same as what everybody else has in society. Every home under local authority control should be put into a programme to upgrade and retrofit any home that does not have adequate insulation. And there are some out there. There's programmes going on, but they're far too slow and they lack focus. Retrofitting homes will help the residents tackle the cost of heating and will also lower carbon emissions. All future public housing should be built to a much higher housing standard. This will avoid the problems that beset social housing in the 70s and also ensure that we're serious about reducing our carbon emissions. Housing standards for public housing should include a wide range of measures to ensure the lowest possible carbon footprint from house building and the lifetime use of the house. They should include insulation, computer-controlled energy-efficient heating systems, local energy generation with solar panels and the reuse of rainwater. Indeed, the collection and reuse of rainwater should be part of planning commissions going forward across all of the areas, and it will be very, very constructive in that regard. When it comes to delivering more housing, of course, we need to increase the supply in every way possible. It all boils down to supply, and that's where this whole thing is. And there has been an attempt to privatise the provision of local authority housing. It hasn't worked, it doesn't work, and it should never be contemplated that it would work. There are about 1,701 people on the housing list in County Westmeath today, Cloncorla. And in addition, there's 800 who have HAP and RAS tenancies and who are on the transfer list. So effectively, those people are entitled to be housed, and 500 people in need of rehousing in other areas. So we know that a number of people, from the number of people attending our clinics, we have about 2,500 people on the housing list effectively in Westmeath. To meet their needs and to solve the wider housing problem, we just need to think outside the box. You know, recently I had a canvassing, and every evening I come back, I've gone and noticed about 3 houses, and I bet you any in the rural area goes there, about 3 houses unoccupied across the area. I'd say that'd be maybe 4. So every evening you're out for 30 evenings, that's 90 houses. Now, I know every deputy knows this and has similar houses in their own areas. And we could do more to bring these privately owned vacant houses back into use. Very often they're left to somebody and they don't have the money to carry out the repairs. And hundreds of millions has been spent on rent supplement and HAP, and some of this money could be diverted into making vacant houses habitable. Now, the house I'm talking about could be made habitable for maybe 30 or 40,000 euros. No free lunch. If we give them a 40,000 grant, we say, look, on the condition that you take on local authority tenants and you maintain them for 7 years, give them a 7-year contract. So to have a house that's brought back into habitation, maybe left by their grandfathers or brothers or uncles to them, and they don't have the money. Let's think outside the box. Let's not be always a prisoner of bureaucracy, Minister. I know what that department's like. I was only in for 8 or 9 months. If I was in it for a few years, I probably have ended up in an asylum, because I could not stick to bureaucracy. That's simple as that. I had to leave on a point of principle on another thing. But my own view is that if I didn't leave on that, I would have gone on another reason. Because I could not stick bureaucracy always coming in and putting the heavy hand down on top of me. I'm somebody who comes from a ordinary working class family who actually resents that. So unfortunately, I'm anti-bureaucratic, and maybe I'm in trouble over saying that, but so be it. She'll be gone over here and they can't do anything with me after that. They could provide great homes for people in County Westmeath, and I'm sure in other counties throughout the country. And you know, I'd venture to say Westmeath is not unique from having a large number of unoccupied houses. And a small grant from the state would help to put them into a habitable condition. And you know, I think, you know, the owners must commit to renting out the properties to social housing for a period of years. And I think we'll get better value this way than leasing properties under the HAP scheme. And we'd be stopping houses going into dereliction in cases where their owners can't afford to do much of them. And a lot of those people, you get a house left from an uncle or that, and it hasn't been in the best. It's still something grand that your uncle left you, and this could help to deliver. Another policy that would permit the state to deliver more public housing, Minister, and I know you won't implement this, but I'd have had a shot at it, was the implementation of the 73 Kenny report. I read this as a student when I was doing law, and I believe in everything that Judge Kenny says. He was an exceptional judge. It's not the first time I've made this suggestion. I've been advocating this point for many years, and indeed in the Labour Social and Affordable House Bill 2016 made this recommendation. I was the cause of that being in the centre of it, in case you're looking to find out. We should legislate for the compulsory purchase of lands at existing use value, building on the Kenny report proposed. By the way, my brother is a farmer, so I know all about this too. And Judge Kenny made it clear there's no constitutional impediment to do this. He proposed paying a premium of up to 25% of lands compulsory purchase, but that was at 1973 prices, and a smaller compensation would be fairer today. But this government has gone in the opposite direction and is selling off public lands to private developers as their great idea to solve the housing crisis. Private developers are only interested in profit, and they'll only build so many when there's profit. Public has a different ethos, different philosophy. We want to build houses to provide for our people. Public ownership of public housing built on public land is how we'll solve this crisis. Labour understands that. Housing organisations outside the House recognise that. Public experts, housing experts are calling for that. Minister, we're all just waiting for Fine Gael to admit that our policies are not working, and to be honest with you, cannot work with the best will in the world. There's only one way. Go back to the old trusted and tried way. Local authorities being development vehicles for the provision of local authority housing.
Thank you, Deputy Penrose.